Okay, so now we're going to go on to the number 3 subject, selection and recruitment. So what have the trends been there? Again, to put in context, we talked about the future work skills that are required for engineers to deal in an increasingly complex technological society. We looked at why public image matters and the current public image. And then we're going to look at recruitment, why, in fact, there's a huge shortage of people going into engineering in English-speaking countries and maybe in Western countries overall. We want to explore why this is. Now, there are some highlights that I'll mention here to set the stage for the rest of the course. So we've said engineering does have a poor image. Many places are trying to improve it with school visits, etc. But overarching, engineering itself has a poor image, and if you stop any person in the streets of London, England, and say, what's engineering? They'll think it's to do with fixing the tube system, fixing a broken down rail, etc. And it's called engineering works. That's the way the word is used. They'll think it's somebody coming to fix your Xerox. They'll think it's somebody coming to fix the TV or the washing machine, fix your toilet, put an antenna on the roof. This is not something that excites young people who want to go into higher education. So the poor image starts in the schools. And one of the big problems with our school system is that the teachers, few have any background whatsoever in science, let alone engineering. Some have maybe some background in physics, some background in biology, some background in mathematics. But overarching, most are from a liberal arts background. And so pretty much are ignorant about the whole profession of engineering, about the aerospace industry, the automotive industry, civil engineering, the infrastructure. They see all these things, but they don't know where they all come from. All these lights in this room, in this building, in the structure, and the fact that there's ventilation systems sending cooler or hotter, this is all just taken for granted. Nobody really stops to think about how all this came about. Incidentally, in third world countries, developing countries, engineering is perceived as one of the highest callings, if not the highest calling, because they realize it's these guys going to bring them fresh water, it's these guys going to provide shelter, it's going to provide the basics of life, it's going to enhance the quality of life. So therefore, in developing countries, engineers, the image of them is much, much different than in Western society, where our quality of life is taken for granted. In high schools, secondary schools, engineers are perceived to be focused on gadgets and like fixing. Again, there are not enough high school teachers with the knowledge to change this perception. And many of the professional institutions in the United States, Canada, the UK, Western Europe, etc., do have volunteer engineers going into schools, but it doesn't stick. It's not embedded in the curriculum. It's a one-off where a guy goes in and talks about his job as a director of a big aerospace program, etc. It's exciting, but it doesn't stick. It's not embedded deep in the system, and the image of engineers as guys with overalls fixing machines versus the image of doctors who are treating patients who have a public face is entirely different. So again, image matters. The other thing is that engineering in schools is associated with science and math. Very little talk about social context, very little talk about cultural issues, social technical issues. In fact, many graduate engineers that actually do go into this, we'll discover as well, look down upon the social sciences, look down upon psychology, sociology, as if it's an inferior academic discipline. Look down upon management studies when in fact it is an expectation at least 50% of graduate engineers will actually go into management, will actually take responsibility for people's performance, business performance and economic performance. And yet, when they're undergraduates, they will look down upon those very subjects. In the English-speaking countries, there are few women. Now, as a person that has been teaching for many years at the University of Toronto, graduate courses in the engineering programs, 30% of the classes, or not 40 sometimes, are female or women. And most of them are from Asian countries or Middle East, etc., where there's a completely different value system about engineering. We're going to explore why this has happened in the West and what the implications are. Samuel Floorman, we're going to be, through the course, you're going to get exposed to many famous historians of technology and engineering, philosophers of engineering, mainly from the US, I might add, who are trying to change it over the last 15 years. Samuel Floorman is one of them. Petrusky is another. And Floorman has said that student engineers are indifferent to liberal arts, which is what I mentioned, to liberal arts. And he says that his finding that this is a huge problem, and it's limiting the thinking capabilities and thinking skills of engineers. Another finding of Samuel Floorman was that engineers tend to accept authority and not question it. In the 1960s, in the United States, in the 1970s, during the time of all the student protests over the Vietnam War, engineers tended to wash their hands off that and have no interest. Again, I'm not here to debate whether students should have risen up against the Vietnam War, or engineering students. It's just something that he discovered, that most were indifferent to the protests about the social issues in society. That's the end of section 3.